I like making everybody get into a really uncomfortable position so you can talk about things early in the morning that nobody wants to discuss.
Yay!
Yay! What's this Terminalist?
That's the show that we finished watching.
Okay. What's this about?
Jack Carr wrote a book called The Terminalist. And Chris Pratt liked it so much that he asked him if he could make an Amazon show. And Amazon was smart and picked it up.
What's an Amazon show? I thought that was the show with big, tall women.
Oh my God, tell me more.
Mitch is absolutely ready to kill both of us.
No, it was really good.
I'm editing all of this out.
Well, you saw a couple episodes. What did you think of it?
Well, I only saw bits and pieces, so I didn't follow the story, but it was intense, to say the least.
It is very intense.
There's some scenes that are graphic.
It's not for the squeamish.
Yeah.
No, the show is like...
And don't eat dinner while you're eating it.
I just want to make
Eat
one
while
thing
you're
clear.
watching it.
Yeah, don't eat dinner while you're eating it.
Shut up.
Okay, one thing I'll make clear is I've been watching The Real Housewives for weeks now, and I have agreed to, and I've enjoyed it.
You suggested it.
I suggested it because we moved here to OC, so I was like, I want to watch The Housewives because everyone talks about it.
And now we've taken a break for a week.
Well, before that, though, I was like, I need a man show. I need a show to watch.
Well, how many seasons... Okay, so how many seasons of Real Housewives of Orange County are there?
16.
And how many did we watch?
Like 10 at the time. 10 or 11.
We just started season 11. We're
Okay.
like 4 episodes into season 11.
So we got up to season 11. So it's 11 seasons times an average of how many episodes a season?
No, you can't do that. Because the first 5 or 6 seasons, the first few seasons were like 10 episodes or 8 episodes. Then the next few seasons they picked up a few more, so it was like 15, 16. Then like when it was really in its heyday, it was doing like 24 episodes a season.
Oh,
So I'd say probably close to about 150 episodes total
can count that.
Total, or you've seen?
that we've seen.
No, you've probably seen 115, 120.
15. Okay, 115, 120 that we've seen.
The Terminalist is only 8 episodes, I believe.
Yes.
So it's less of a time commitment, you're saying?
Yes.
But the episodes are also an hour.
So, yeah. Anyway, I just brought that up because I've been watching women bicker and fight for weeks, which is...
What is that supposed to mean?
Which is entertaining as hell.
But enough about the home life. Let's talk about the show.
But then I was like, I want to watch the show, and I've heard a lot of good things, and everyone's saying it's great. My friends said it's good. And I watched the first episode. I was like, okay, good production value, all that stuff. The acting's good. But then at the end of the first episode, I was like, holy shit. And I got hooked, and I bought the book. And so I'm going to start reading that as soon as
So was it a book first or a show
It was a
first?
book. It was a book first.
Okay.
James Reese. He's kind of like a Jack Ryan,
Yeah, I was trying
Tom
to think of
Clancy
that.
type of character. So it's kind of in that realm, but you know, set to modern times more, and well written, very well written. I mean, as far as the show goes, they paced it well. Chris
I have
Pratt.
to say, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, finish. What were you saying?
I was going to say the most jarring part of that for me was seeing Constance Wu, who is only known by me on being like Fresh Off the Boat, that horrible ABC comedy show where she like plays this Chinese immigrant.
Didn't that get canceled?
Probably, and rightly so. But I only know her from that show where she plays this ridiculously stereotypical Asian woman. And so seeing her in something more serious and
Yeah.
less Asian was jarring. for
And
me.
not only that, she did it well, and they did her character well. They wrote a strong female character.
But I couldn't.
with a
I
backstory.
couldn't not see Chinese immigrant
Well,
with 5 kids.
yeah. I won't. We're going to keep this spoiler free, but they do go into that, and there's more to it. And her character is well served, and she portrays the character.
Yeah, I think she was interesting.
Because at first she was like, "Oh,
And
here
she's
we go."
clearly a good actress that she can do both
Yeah.
of these shows, but
Well,
it was just weird.
Yeah, I mean, just her acting. Her acting was was very good. And that aside, her character was well written, and they gave her good dialogue, and they wrote her as a intelligent journalist that has
An
integrity.
Asian intelligent? No.
Anyway,
Do you remember the Mad TV sketch called The Average Asian? And Bobby Lee played a guy who was Asian. Everyone expected him to be like a doctor or something like that, and he was just like an everyday, like kind of like school dropout. It was great.
No, never heard of it.
The only Mad TV skit I really remember is the two I remember are Miss Swan, of course,
Of course, because you are Miss Swan.
and that stupid grown-up kid
Stuart?
Yeah,
Stuart.
Chris Pratt plays a dark role for once, and
He's in blackface. It's really upsetting.
and pulls it off. Like, not just like he doesn't have really any comic relief. He's
Right.
not the comic relief of the show, and that you're used to him being that. So he like when he's on screen, it's like it's serious.
And it's not like a goofy guy trying to play an action star, like going over the top and being like,
Yeah.
like, get to the coordinates. And it's like over. He's just him, and it's really it's. I was impressed at how quickly you're able to get over him being Andy in Parks and Rec, watching this like within a minute.
Well, because I think also Jack Carr. I listened to the Rogan podcast with him, the author, and he even said like he kind of. I don't know. He may have written the character with him in mind. Like,
Oh, really?
Like I think visualizing him, like you know, his mannerism kind of thing. So I think Chris Pratt's always been an advocate and supporting, Back the Blue and veterans. Like he is all for that. Like in all of his like media posts and stuff he does, he supports men of courage, and so no one else could have played the role as well as him after seeing him do it, because he's got in some scenes he's the guy in charge, and he is convincingly a leader,
Right.
But also like he has a kindness to him that it's kind of like approachable, but then like he gets dark and twisted, and you're just like, oh shit, what's he gonna do next?
Well,
like,
and a vulnerability too. Like there's, you have to range a lot of stuff like that.
well, he's a victim in the whole show.
Yeah.
Like not a helpless victim, but he is the victim of other people's plans and actions, and so he's the one who has to respond and react to all of them. I mean, he doesn't have to, but the way he chooses to.
It's one of those shows where I'm like, how did this get made?
Exactly, and I love that it got made. I'm going to read the book soon, and I want to see how well they adapted the book, and but the show, with all the tropes and all the like little mentions of little like things here and there of being more right leaning, conservative, themes, it is blowing up Amazon. Like it's the #1 show on Amazon, and they're already going to make a second one.
Didn't you say there were Easter eggs in there? Like they.
Oh yeah,
Fox News was
the one. Although at the end, CNN they did use CNN in a clip, but like the Fox News was the news channel that was on the TVs when something happened that he did that made the news.
Is Fox an affiliate with
Amazon?
Prime? Yeah.
No, I don't know how that works. However, Chris Pratt produced it, so I don't know what that means as far as money, like if he put his own money in it or not. But not just that, but like Black Rifle Coffee, of course, makes an appearance there. There's all sorts of like clothing brands and stuff too that sort of have an appearance. So they do get sponsorship, not like in your face sponsorship, but
And
you're
there
like,
sure as hell wasn't a lot of Disney and Coke everywhere.
That's
no.
true.
Yeah, no, there was none. It was.
Oh, I have a headache. The only thing that's going to help me is this refreshing Coca-Cola available at all retail stores.
Well, what people this show, like, it's not about any. There's no COVID in it, obviously. That doesn't exist in the show. However, one of the themes of the show would really, I think, because of what we've gone through and what conservatives are like, okay, these pharmaceutical companies are to blame for what's going on with the health and with the COVID response. This show not being about that, it does kind of pharma companies, big bad pharma companies, and so people love that theme because they can have they have a common enemy.
Which is interesting because this show was made over the past couple of years, so they had to be more careful in filming it than probably if they just started now. And we saw another
Depending
movie,
on where they filmed it.
right? But still, there was at least some kind of we had
Oversight.
oversight, because you had to have somebody sitting there and taking people's temperature and all that horseshit. But we saw a movie last weekend that was filmed during the same period of time that almost wanted you to know that it was filmed during the past couple of years with the masks on it, and that was, 3,000 Years a Slave? What was that?
3,000 Years of Longing, which was not good.
I've never seen a movie start off with so much promise and have such a good trailer and then just sort of turn into a big wet fart, like 2/3 of the way through or 3/4 of the way through.
It was upsetting because it was interesting, it was elaborate, and it was fun.
Right.
And then it just, like you said, it just...
Well, because it's like, okay, we all know Aladdin. I hope you didn't see the live-action Aladdin because it was really bad. Like, I think that did more damage to Will Smith's career than the slap.
Ugh.
It was upsettingly bad.
In fact, yeah, I haven't watched any of the live-action Disney movies.
You're not missing anything.
You don't watch it.
I kind of refuse to.
Yeah, it's probably for the best. There's so much. There's
it
so much
ruins
more.
Your childhood, like.
Well, right. There's magic in the animated version. You don't need to see the real life person, but then they have to add animation on it to make it look plausible. That's so stupid.
What's upsetting to me about these live action remakes is that they're hiring actors and actresses people recognize. Like, ooh, like for I admit I was excited to see Beauty and the Beast remake.
Oh, I did see that one.
And
sorry.
They remade that?
Emma Watson plays Belle, and she can't sing.
God.
Like she can hold a few notes, but she's not a singer, and it's obvious in the movie. And anything there, like the opening song, you know, I forget what it's called. She can hold a note for a little bit, but like not very well. So you can tell they kind of tuned it to make it sound better. At least to me, that's what it sounded like. But that's what's upsetting because these older, you know, 80s, 90s cartoons that we grew up with are they hire incredible voice actors to play the characters. They're not top billing actors by any means, but they have good voices and they can sing very well. So when you hire a live action actor who's good at performing on screen, you know, good actor, nothing wrong with that. They don't have the vocal range that a voice actor has.
She doesn't have the range.
Well, that's a really good point because one of the podcasts I listen to, Mark Germain's show, Mr. KABC, has April Winchell on there, who is a Disney voice actress. But she has to go in sometimes and, like, for example, they did 101 Dalmatians, the movie, the animated movie, before the live-action movie, which is the only live-action movie I'll support. But afterward, they did the 101 Dalmatians animated series. And, of course, they weren't going to have whoever did the movie go and do the voice for the series. Yeah. So she played Cruella for, like, 8 seasons of that.
Oh, wow.
And so she's the person that they call to do that because she can do a lot of voices. And she's like, for example, they did some live action movie, or they did some animated movie where in the original it was Jane Fonda playing it, and she's like, Jane Fonda's too fucking busy to come and do a cartoon twice a week. So they have me come in, and I have to try to do her voice to do something like that. But she's like, one of the things that I know is that I don't understand is they get these big names to come in and do the animated movie or the series or something like that, but they're actually not that good.
No, they're not.
They don't have... They're so used to performing on a screen or doing something very visual that when they get into that booth and they play it back, there's no emotion or feeling in there.
It's just a name to draw people.
And then they get frustrated, and then they have to do a bunch of takes, and they're like, why the fuck am I doing this? And then they storm out, and then they have to find somebody else to do it.
But you have to give it to Disney, though. They're not stupid. They're doing this very well. You remake or make a live action version of something that people have nostalgia over.
Right.
So people our age, most of them, are going to go see it. Because it's like, oh, I remember this when I was a kid, we're going to go see it. But you're also making a movie for a new generation. Same basic movie. But you're changing it oh so slightly to drop in these little hints of, wokeism.
Right.
So, for example, in The Beauty and the Beast, this one very minor character in the animated one is now a more major character, still minor, but a little bit more front facing, and he's clearly gay. He clearly wants to, fuck Gaston or whatever. Like,
the Teapot's trans now?
No,
it just slaps you upside the face with this guy who might have had like 2 lines.
What?
This guy might have had 2 lines in the animated.
He got a musical segment with Gaston.
Okay.
He had a whole musical scene.
My point is,
they're adding in subtext.
He was not memorable in the new one. He's memorable because it was like overtly sexual innuendos.
Yeah, well, because because in the movie he was like he's like this little shrimpy guy who like wants to be Gaston.
Right.
Like he looks up to, like he admires him. But in this one, it was like, of course, you can't have
I don't want to be him. I want to be railed by him.
Exactly. You can't have this innocence of just like someone looking up to another man, even though they may be corrupt and misogynist, whatever. Like, no, he has to be attracted to him. There's no possible way a man will want to look up to Gaston unless he wants to fuck him.
Doesn't that do so much more of a disservice? Like, if you're someone like you're a freshman and you look up to like the senior on the football team or something like that. Now the senior football team's going to see this movie and automatically assume, oh, this guy just wants me to fuck him or something. When it's like, no, this guy's a shrimp and he wants to gain some weight. What's wrong with that?
Well, no, that like for me that reminds me of like some like me growing up because I was obviously gay, but like closeted and not out or anything like that. Gay. But like I have friends where it's like as a growing up adolescent gay, you're confused because it's like. I look up to this person, but like they're also attractive. But like I don't want to do that. But like
that's a very confusing feeling.
It is because it's like it's not that you want to do that with them. It's just you're confused by like, wait, what are the like? What is this like relationship?
I honestly think now, like if you present those feelings to an adult, you're told that like, oh, it's time to start hormones, time to transition, like,
or just you're gay, like be gay, like it's fine,
maybe
like
not.
Go make out with them. It's like no, that's not smart.
But my original point being that, sorry, before I set us off on a tangent. They're doing this, obviously purposely, and they know that they're going to get money from people like us who are going to go see it because it gives them the feels.
Right.
And then they're going to get money from the new generation while they're also indoctrinating them. So they're doing this very intelligently.
So be smart if you have kids and they're at the age where they can enjoy Disney stuff. Not 23, by the way, like actual children. Show them the classics. Show them the classics.
Well,
get them as much of the classic media as you can get.
Before someone in the comments goes to race me to it, I'm going to say, except, of course, The Little Mermaid, which had the subliminal, like, the dicks in it and all that stuff.
Well, okay.
But that real?
It was real.
I didn't know about that as okay.
No, you didn't notice it as a kid.
As a child, no,
you didn't.
And now, gay.
Well, no,
but they clearly
radicalized by the Little
put things in there that were not appropriate. And yes, I've seen them in the original.
That was one of the first E-Bombs World like internet memes back in 2005. It was like, you think this is just an innocent thing? Yeah. Think again. There's a dick in the organ.
Well, it's like 2 or 3 little things, but still, the fact that they put them in there, it's like,
okay, that's no different than like Pixar movies where there's enough humor for the kids to enjoy, but they also throw in a little adult humor subtly that kids can't understand. But
it's slightly different because, like, literally you see a dick on the cover of, like,
yeah, I've seen it before. Yeah,
it is actually there, and then you see the guy clearly getting an erection, where it's not it's a joke that goes over their heads at that. But when you're actually like seeing physical signs of like sex, it's like it's a little bit different.
Well, I mean, is it going to get gayer than having Ursula as divine in there? Like, it doesn't get gayer than that. Yeah. Honestly, I'm going to say something very controversial. I feel like The Little Mermaid has been shoved down my throat my entire life, and I never really liked it. It was
there are
not
a lot of Disney movies I didn't like,
but it was not. It didn't. I feel like I never got why people got so into it. I think it was like, like ugly girls who tried to be like, I'm like Ariel, like I'm just a mermaid. And I'm like, she was kind of a bitch. And I think that there was a lot of other ones that had like very, like Snow White, like really like interesting stories and stuff like that. Also, and that was not one that it just didn't register for me.
Well, also, I don't know. Culturally, Little Mermaid's confusing because it's set in the Mediterranean. And Eric's obviously like Spanish or Greek or Italian or something like that, and but it has like Caribbean music in it, so it's yeah. So it's kind of like there's a Caribbean, and it's like I don't have a problem, but it's just like okay, like it's like you're trying to be cultural, but you're like kind of a mess, like where's this taking place, in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean? Whereas Beauty and the Beast set in France, obviously,
right?
France. You realize that Princess Clara on Drawn Together is emulating Ariel.
Right.
Just not a mermaid.
Right.
Racist cunt.
I think that, I don't know, I feel like there's a very narrow portion of a child's life where they should be into or enjoying that stuff, and it's really weird to me to see like then in their teens, then as an adult, Then when they get married, how many of these girls are sitting there with their Ariel-themed weddings? That's a little fucking weird to me. I'm sorry. And they're the same ones who have the Disney passes, and I'm like, you're 33. Like, is it? Are we really still, like, did you read any other stories in that period of time? Did you read chapter books?
You know what's great about Disney is that they do have kids stuff, but you can grow out of that and go into their adult content because Disney now owns, like, a lot of shit. So
well, that's the
you
thing,
don't have to be 25 years old and still watching the same.
So they're going to cram you into Marvel stuff and stuff like that.
Marvel's just poorly written garbage. So that's like it's not fair.
There's so many more real stories that I think are interesting though, and one thing I think gets left out a lot is, does anyone ever graduate from Disney stuff into real chapter books, the classics, the Dickens, the Tolstoy, the stories that have been passed down for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years? Does anyone ever step? Because that's a step that they're supposed to.
The education system has successfully made that homework and not enjoyable.
And that's the problem, I think, is because when we were young, that was like the progression it was made. It was you do phonics, then you do picture books, that's usually where Disney comes in, and then chapter books, which you're starting to step out of that Disney phase, and then once you get into some of the basic chapter books, I mean, God, I remember that's like Hardy Boys and stuff like that, and Nancy Drew, and then I almost said Dr. Drew, and then you go into the classics, and then you go into the heavy classics. Like, I don't have any bones. I don't think any kids are saying they're reading War and Peace, but that doorstop. But that's sort of the progression that you make into then formal literature.
Yeah,
but that doesn't exist anymore, I think.
Well, I think.
By the way, just so we're just to make it clear that I was teaching high school when Common Core was being adopted.
Oh God!
And I don't think a lot of people know this. The original aim of Common Core was to take literature out of schools.
Biggest mistake ever.
Well, they didn't actually do it, but their original goal was to make all reading in like schools more like what you would read on the ACT or SAT to get you prepared to take those tests. So it was more of this, let's teach them to take a test.
Oh, God.
So let's take out the classics that teach them about life and history and make them read, this bullshit like that reads like stereo instructions that we put on the ACT and SAT to get them, in that mindset of taking a standardized test like that.
That's so. What's fast? Okay,
They did not succeed, thank God.
I'm not
that was the idea.
Yeah, I'm not an educator or anything, but I never understood how, like, okay, we're going to make. So when I hear that, like, oh, let's change our curriculum to accommodate the test because they're not passing, it's like you created a poor test. Like, people who create tests should be smarter. Be like, we need to be clever to making a test that we can gauge children's learning and their evaluation without getting involved in their education. Like, the test shouldn't be part of the education. The test should evaluate the education. It should be completely separate. And it's the test designer's job to, like, how to, like, we need to gauge these kids and we need to do it without them knowing, kind of like,
What you're suggesting is, and you're absolutely right, is let's not tailor the education to the test, but let's tailor the test to the education.
I don't know, to me that just sounds like common sense. Like, that just sounds like how
you're a radical extremist and you deserve to be deported.
So the test makers, like, I grew up in Washington State. That's where I went to school, and they have this thing called the WASL. And it's, the assessment of student learning and all that stuff.
Isn't that a Christmas drink?
That's what I was thinking. Everyone, all the homeschool moms hated it because, like, it was so standardized, and every teacher at public school, there were several parents who had kids in public school but pulled them out because this test was like, the teachers have stopped teaching and just like, oh, WASL, prepare for the WASL, you have to pass the WASL, because if you don't, then I could lose my job, or it looks bad on me. And so like they lose complete interest in educating your kid and just preparing them for a test to take. So it's like, that's all our society can.
And by the way, I don't blame the teachers for doing that, because they're right. They'll lose their jobs, they'll lose their, they'll lose a lot if they don't get you to perform well on the test. So they're going to tailor their education to the test. Yeah. We've completely fucked it up. And Wyatt and I have talked about this in a previous episode. Okay. So I apologize for derailing.
I think that's an important sort of like continuation of what we talked about, because I was talking about, you're a private school up in the Northwest. You were homeschooled in the Northwest. You were private school in the South, and I was public school in the West. We all had very different backgrounds as far as that happened, but I think we were all there watching the decline of the educational system happen in real time. Like, from when I entered elementary school, and some of the teachers who had been there and did a very good job, and they're like, look, I formed this curriculum over the past 35 years of teaching young people. I now teach their children.
Yeah.
And they were successful. They went on to all get great jobs, have great families and everything. To then, by the end of elementary school going into high school, of those teachers have either retired or basically been let go by now. And it's been replaced with a younger generation of teachers who they just teach the test because they're terrified that something's going to happen to them if they don't.
Yeah.
And then watching the sort of declining outcomes, like the ranking, the literacy rate, the math aptitude rate, from when I started to when I left, just decline.
To my mother's credit, she taught mostly in private schools, and so had a curriculum, like you said, based on like 30 years of experience. And then the last few years of her career, she moved to a public school in Tennessee and had to start teaching to a standardized test. She adopted her curriculum that she grew over the 30 years of teaching to teach toward a test without actually saying, I'm now teaching you what's on the test. Like, she saw what was on the test, she looked through her stuff, like, she just adopted, this, and her...
That's a hard job, by the way.
That's what a good teacher does.
But in her students, by the way, even her first year of teaching outperformed... like 3 times what they expected those students to get.
Wow. That looks good. That's good for her.
Right.
That's awesome.
So when she retired, they were like, do you really want to do that? She was like, yes.
Well, back to Terminal S?
We need to improve the education system so we can improve the quality of the content that we get.
Yes.
Like that was another thing. That 3,000 years of longing started... So basically, and we derailed onto Aladdin because, okay, there's a big genie.
Yeah.
Finds a magic lamp and everything. And so you're like, ooh, we can actually go through some of these cool stories of history, like back to ancient Babylon and these different points at which this genie got to see history happen. That in and of itself, I think, is a very interesting concept, because she's in 2021 or 2022 or whatever in Britain, and this genie is talking about, like, okay, what is this mystical creature throughout history? What do they feel when they enter an era and they see the things that happen?
Yeah.
And there were these cool sort of like twisted dramatizations and depictions of Sheba, the Queen of Sheba, the what was it, Suleiman in Turkey, and then going through history and having it progress. Then at a certain point, it just sort of cuts to the present day, and it turns from a movie about life and about events that happen and people that come into your life and things like that, and just goes straight into this weird, sappy rom-com feelings.
It transforms from a movie that was teaching you a lesson about longing.
Yes.
Like the heart's desire and what trouble and what harm it could bring you if you only ever listen to your feelings and don't think logically about things. And then it turns into, it just in an instant transforms into a modern day, what it's like to date a genie, what it's like to have a genie as a boyfriend kind of thing. It's like it was like this is a different movie.
I've seen movies go off the rails before. I haven't seen one do it as swiftly and as upsettingly as that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is true. I can't prove it by any means. But I was thinking, like, George Miller may very well have written and directed the first part, but then the last 15 minutes, the writing team took over and just said, we're ending it like this.
Yeah, something happened.
I don't think George Miller was good at it.
Whoever made the first part of the movie did not make the second part of the movie.
No, that's not
disjointed.
Yeah, it was disjointed. That's a good word. But George Miller is a good director.
I almost wish I had like heartburn or diarrhea or something and had to leave 3/4 of the way through.
So anyone who hasn't,
I would have thought, wow, what a wonderful movie. I'm sorry I missed the end.
So here's anyone who hasn't seen this movie and wants to watch it, and if you want to enjoy it, be happy leaving the theater.
The second she leaves in Istanbul, leave the theater.
Yeah, when she wakes up from So there's a part when she wakes up in the hotel, it's daytime, and you think, oh, it was all just a dream.
Yes.
Leave.
I don't care what you have to do. Pull the fire alarm. Get the fuck out of there.
Get out of the theater.
Out of there.
And be like, oh my God, that was a good movie.
Turn off the TV and you'll be like, wow, Tilda Swinton was great. Idris Elba was great. All these other actors across history were great. I'm very happy that I saw that.
Yeah.
Everything else after that will upset you. It's like Godfather 2 to Godfather 3.
You know what's fun? You know what's crazy about Amazon? Because they made Terminal List.
Yeah.
Top ranking. Audiences love it. The critics liked it too.
Even critics had
to give it credit. It was well written, well paced, all that stuff, well performed. And Amazon bought MGM, didn't they? Mm-hmm. So Amazon bought MGM. MGM made 3,000 Years of Longing. So this is 3,000 Years of Longing is an Amazon movie.
I think they made it before then. Maybe.
Well, before we get too long, because we have to cut this soon. I hate. We've had a very nice theme going on through all of this, but and I hate being a disjointed podcast where we throw in something random at the end. But we can't not talk about what happened yesterday. The Queen. We can't not.
Elton John's single's been out for a couple weeks now.
Queen died in like the 90s, right? Like the lead singer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Well, he's upset because on the last podcast I talked about yesterday, and this goes to show how fast the news moved yesterday. Yesterday morning I woke up and I saw Buckingham Palace announcement, the Queen is not doing well. And I told you, remember, I was like, oh, something's not right. And then you went to work. I got in the shower, and I know that by their thing, if something, there's so many rules and restrictions about how all this happens. By 6 p.m. their time, if the Queen has passed, someone walks out of Buckingham Palace, gets a letter, sticks it to the gate, and then walks back in. That's it. That's how they announce these things, and it can only come from them. And it's there's a whole process of if she passes, what they're supposed to do is her private secretary then calls the prime minister, says London Bridge is down in code word in case anyone's listening. This is all like war preparations that they did in case one of them was bombed in London during World War II, and then you had to communicate that the monarch was down, but not alarm a bunch of people, that was happening, or let the other side who's listening in to all of your conversations know that they actually executed a successful strike.
Yeah.
So had to call in, London Bridge is down, calls the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister then assembles a couple of people. They notify the BBC. The broadcasting goes to black. Anybody on TV is required to wear black in mourning. And then every form of broadcast in the United Kingdom gets switched on to a pre-recorded message saying, the Queen has died. They play the My Country 'Tis of Thee. They play the tribute, and an anchor comes in and says, this is what happened. All of that was yesterday when Buckingham Palace put out a health announcement. In the morning when you left, that's extremely unusual. Because if there's a health announcement, it means either death happened or is imminent.
Yeah.
So that happened, and so people were really nervous, like, oh, what's going to happen? The Prime Minister who the Queen had met 2 days before, 48 hours before, and given her the consent to be in charge of the government, because you have to ask the Queen to form a government in her name, if you're the Prime Minister, just met with her 2 days before. There's pictures. They just met. Was handed a note in Parliament and got up and had to say, okay, her health, something happened, she's under medical supervision, everyone, prayers, thoughts, all that stuff. So yesterday morning we get up, which is 3 p.m. UK time. You go to work, I get in the shower. By the time, we record our podcast, and I made a joke or something about, I was like, blah, blah, because this woman looks like Prince Charles. Actually, it was about Rachel Levine. I was like, Rachel Levine looks like Prince Charles, for God's sake. Which is an old, Carlin joke. I get in the shower. It's 6 p.m. their time. I'm watching Sky News Live. Nothing happens. There's a bunch of media gathered outside of Buckingham Palace. I'm like, oh, okay, everything's fine. In the period of time between me taking a shower, getting dressed, and coming back up, you and I are sitting here, and then all of a sudden an announcement, she's dead. And I was like, what? What? She passed? You're telling me this now for the first time?
Oh, my God.
And we get out, happened?
We go get in the car, and you know that Trump clip of when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed and Tiny Dancer starts playing? Guess what song's playing on the radio when I get there?
Oh, I wonder which one.
Yes, and I have a video clip of it.
As he turned it on, he didn't change the
I didn't touch anything.
Nothing. He flipped the key, and it was playing. And
I grabbed his arm and I just looked at him, and I was like, Like, we were in shock that happened.
Oh my God.
So, yes.
You're obsessed.
But
with that moment in history.
I made a Prince Charles joke. Within 30 minutes, he automatically became King Charles III. So to continue, I mean, there's going to be ceremony and all this stuff in the next couple of weeks. But to continue, the second that someone is pronounced dead, the next person automatically becomes. They can't wait.
Yeah.
So technically, someone always occupies the throne. There is no daylight between any of that. So he could have chosen a name. He chose King Charles. He's now King Charles III. Camilla is the queen consort. So she will be referred to as Queen Camilla. And Prince William and Kate Middleton now have they take on his father and mother-in-law's father and stepmother's old title. So he, instead of just being the Duke of what is he?
Sussex? Wales? No, not Wales.
No, Wales is his father was a Prince of Wales. Sussex is Harry. Cambridge. So he's the Duke of Cornwall and Cambridge. So he takes on both titles now. So everybody shifts up one. Everybody gets one extra title.
Okay, but King Charles is not going to last long.
Well, he's 73. He's the oldest person. He's the oldest person in British history to ever take the throne of the country. Because usually when something like this happens, like the Queen was 24, 25 when she became Queen, and she had that until she was 96.
Yeah. So
71 years, which has never been happened in British history before. Never happened in world history
Longest
before.
serving queen or monarch.
Ever.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, think of all the wars and stuff and the fights over the throne back then. It's like people don't live that long, and illness and all that.
But there are already, there are tons of people both mourning and celebrating her death, and it's all over social media. It's just like
I just don't.
Kind of horrible.
It's sad that someone died. I don't care though.
Well, the nicest.
Honestly.
I think the nicest thing that was said was one of my followers said something. Who, by the way, lives up in Minnesota. It doesn't give a fuck about anything. And let me see if I can find it. He said something like, "Anybody enjoyed this day? Like, this is stupid. Like, I look at the Queen. It reminds me of my grandmother, who I love very much. Obviously, this woman was a grandmother. That's all that you can say."
Well, because she was in a position of power, everyone's going to assume everything that has gone wrong is her fault. So.
Yes, and nothing that's gone right.
Yes, nothing's gone right for them. They live in the most sophisticated and most advanced society ever to exist, and it's all the Queen's fault because she made it. Awful.
Right.
It's awful. It's all awful. Everything you experience in this world is awful, and it's someone else's fault.
Well, yeah, and I think that a lot of the blame placed on her for the Princess Diana things obviously should be placed on her son, who is now the king. She received a lot of criticism for that when she really did the best in that situation that she could have.
It's funny, speaking of that, we recently watched the Diana documentary, and there's no narration, there's no cuts to a modern day someone living today. None of that. It is literally just clip after clip of footage from Diana's life.
Right.
Strung together chronologically in a really good, like, the editing of this documentary was really good. It was very good. I can't remember what it's called, but it's about Diana. It's on HBO, I believe. And when they finally get to the car accident happening and talking about who she was seeing at the time, it's like everyone thinks the Queen killed her. The royal family had her killed. It's like, wait, she was involved with this Egyptian tycoon who had all sorts of ties to a lot of shady stuff. And so it's like, why is the first jump to think the royal family?
Yeah, the Al Fayed family was involved in a lot.
And he was not on good standing with a lot of people at that time. So there's a number of people who wanted him dead and took her out with him. So it's like, it was. Well, I don't buy the royal family.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't care.
So what in reference to what I was saying. About people celebrating. So, someone I follow on social media posted, "I now realize that there is a large section of humanity seemingly on the far right who legitimately believe the Queen was the devil, and an equally large section on the far left who blame her for apartheid, conflict between Israel and Palestine, etc. How can one reason with such fascinating individuals? So my question is, she was equally hated by the two extremes. The left has their stupid, colonization, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, she wasn't directly a part of a lot of that, maybe indirectly. But what about the far right? Why are there so many people on the far right who hated her?
I don't think that there really is that many.
But there are. I was seeing people that I follow celebrating that she was dead, and I'm like, I don't really understand why you're doing that. Like, but I didn't want to ask and be like,
yeah. Well, I think the whole monarch tradition, the whole monarch thing is weird anyway. Like, I don't understand it, and it's like they have power, but that they have Parliament and the Prime Minister, and it's just weird.
Well, it's like one of the things that I wrote a piece that will be coming out probably later today, talking about it was, okay, all of those things being the case, put yourself in this person's position. You're born into a family, you have a very nice upbringing, and then all of a sudden a war happens, and you guys are shoved into shelters, and there is another country that's ready to kill your father any given time, waiting for him to die. And so you're raised in that environment of there's this sort of, I have to protect my country, then myself, then my family. That level of sort of downline. And so that's what you're taught. And then you grow up in your early 20s, and all of a sudden your father dies very suddenly, and now you have an uncle who abandoned the role completely, and now this role falls on you. This crown, which is why the show The Crown, it falls on your head, and you have a job that you didn't ask for, really didn't want, if you could have chosen,
really didn't expect to ever have,
really didn't want. Now everything you do, from the person you picked to be your partner in life to the children that you have, all of it is in service to the country and not to yourself. Scrutinized endlessly, and there's no way out until you die. There's no way out. You can't step away from it. Your uncle did, and it almost brought the country to heal.
Yeah.
So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, you have to just execute this sort of sense of duty, and that's what you do, and that's what she did. And I think that one of the things that a lot of people, she's probably one of the greatest political minds of her generation, because you also can't express your opinion formally about anything.
No.
Because your opinion can be considered that you favor something, and then that sends everything else into, well, I'm pro you, I'm anti you. And
well, remember, she is appointed by God.
Right.
She is like, so according to them, she's not just like, oh, you're the daughter of so-and-so, so you get this. She's also, they believe, like, divinely appointed.
Right.
Like, she's touched by God to be the leader of their country. And
yes,
you can't escape that and
right.
get away from it. And also, you can't be political about things. You can't have an opinion, like you said. And so it's, because if you have an opinion, then people will think that's God's opinion.
And that's where King Charles is going to have a very big issue, because he has lots of opinions about things, and he hasn't always been quiet about them. Yeah. He's been very outspoken sometimes, and that's gotten him in a lot of trouble.
That's why the Crown show did so good, because it kind of made like, oh my gosh, the Queen is so selfish, but at the same time, they're like, oh, but she's got a duty to uphold. And like,
you have a job. This job sucks.
Well, the Crown show did a good job, like, balancing that. Like, yes, it was sad. This person was not treated fairly in the Queen's decision, but at the same time, the Queen did the decision because of this. And it's like, oh,
you can't favor one person over the entire country.
Yeah, you can't favor your sister over the nation.
Right. Her sister was imagine your sister being your best friend and an absolute fucking mess.
Yeah.
Like, for years and years, you have your mother to deal with too, who has an opinion about everything, and is half in the bag, and so you've got those two people to deal with. Then all of a sudden, they both go. All of your children are divorced. None of them have had one stable marriage. You just need a couple of grandchildren to continue this, because your children are all impulsive and impetuous, and everyone's looking at it being a reflection on you. Yeah. So it's a tough position, but. I even Trump was interviewed yesterday, and he's like, she didn't miss.
Yeah. Well, what is good, like, I don't know a whole lot about them, but Kate Middleton and Prince William, like, they seem like a wholesome.
Yeah.
Like, they like, William probably saw his parents and be like, my kids will not be raised in that, and found a good woman to, like, who is a good mother and stuff. And so it's like, they might be the family that as far as the image of the monarch, like they might.
Well, that's why she brought William in the past few years, and she was like, "You're going to learn how all these things work."
Yeah.
So just in case. Also, your father's 73. Like, let's be real here.
Yeah.
Now that we've brought it back to, you mentioned the crown and entertainment and stuff. We brought it full circle. Brought it back to the original topic. So
there was one more thing I want. There was one more thing I want. Don't roll your fucking eyes. One last thing about the Queen, because you brought it up. One thing that I liked yesterday was a lot of the very personal accounts that people had who had either met her, spent time with her, some of her ladies in waiting, and one of the ones said, it was really interesting. She was interested in two things, like the whole time I spent with her: the people around her, and technology. So she'd be very observant, and because she was a little bit introverted, but she would make sure to put you at ease as someone that's in her presence, because people would get nervous, they would fall over themselves, they do the curtsy and everything like that, and she'd be very personable. She'd have certain topics that she could refer to, like the weather, like the dogs, that can kind of put you down at ease. Like some people were very emotional. One person talked about he was on the verge of tears once meeting her because his mother just passed, and she knew, and so she spent 30 minutes talking about the dogs, and it completely took his mind off of what was bothering him. And also technology. She's like, how does this computer work? How does an email work? How does all this stuff work? And driving well into her 90s, including a story where the king of Saudi Arabia came and visited, and she's like, they have to go to the other side of the ground. She's like, okay, I'll drive you. And he hops in the car, and a woman driving an Islamic king, and she drove like a maniac just to fuck with him a little bit.
Oh my God.
And he's screaming to the translator, get her to slow down, get her to slow down. The translator's yelling. She's like, we're almost there, and just speeding through and scaring the shit out of him. Yeah. So there's certain things like that where it's how much can you do within that role to afford humanity to something that people think is just a figurehead or just a religious figure, and that's that no one was able to before her, and nobody afterward is going to be able to afford that much humanity to a role like that while still maintaining the dignity of what the role is.
Well, it's crazy too. It's like, hearing you talk about that just in brief is like, our system over here is political, where I want to choose a candidate I agree with most, who says the things I like, and things like me. We're all different. We all think different. We all have our own, unique ideas about topics. But when you have a monarch like that, and it's like, it's weird to think one person ruling like that. But like, if that person can achieve what the Queen was able to do, and be neutral and not have an opinion and not express opinion. She's a better journalist than half the journalists we have over here. And so it's like, not that she writes, but like, it is kind of fascinating. It's like, there's something to be said about someone who can be non-partisan and also like still do a good job. Right. And make sure everyone's being serviced and served and everything. So it's just like...
Well, that's what one of the accounts, this Nixon account I follow, said something to the effect of, for every day for 70 years, she got a red box of not just the morning's media, but every political letter, letters from the prime minister, the cabinet members, everything like that, all in one box. And that is her work. And so she goes through there, she makes comments, it informs her decision-making and stuff like that. For 70 years... In history, I don't think anyone has been that attuned to the goings-on of the world or humanity for 70 years, every single day, than she has. That's a wealth of knowledge that we lost.
And I'm not saying the UK is like a perfect country and has it all figured out. However, it's the only other country out there that's similar to ours in the sense that they have a very diverse group of citizens. Like, it's not just. It's majority. It's not even majority Caucasian anymore.
Well, I don't know.
Like, they've got so much immigration happening there, so it's like they're no longer this homogenous nation of just like one race of people. They've got several different people immigrating there.
They're entering a very difficult era now. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen.
It is crazy because you don't like. It's like, oh yeah, she died. She was old, so I expected it. But at the same time, like, she's been running like countries for like 70 years. Like, so this is a big. That was no small.
This is an enormous shift.
Yeah, this is like what's going to happen next.
Can't say the next 70 years are going to be as peaceful.
Oh God.
Anyway, well, on that note, now that you're giving me the stink eye,
have a wonderful day and go fuck yourself.
Yes.